So what are classes and IDs? Well, so far in the course we've seen a number of standard selectors that allow us to style existing HTML tags. So if we want to style the paragraphs on our pages, we can use the P selector. If we want to style an H1 header, we can use the H1 selector. But sometimes this isn't enough, and fortunately CSS allows us to create our own custom selectors called classes and IDs. And these give us a much finer control over design. Using a standard selector, we can easily make an H2 header blue. But what if you wanted to make the H2 headers in the sidebar, or maybe in the footer, a different colour to the H2 headers on the rest of the site? We can't use a standard selector for that, at least not on its own, because if we were to make H2 blue, then all the H2s are blue. Or what if you had a certain sentence or phrase in a paragraph that you wanted to highlight yellow, as if you were using a highlighter pen on your web page? You can't do that with a standard P selector, as that would change the whole paragraph. Well, this is where classes and IDs can help us. So the first thing we need to do is really understand the difference between them, and then we can look at some examples of how to use them. The difference between classes and IDs is something that a lot of people get confused about, but the easiest way to remember it is if you think of a class being made up of a number of individuals, but an ID as being unique to one of those individuals, then you'll remember the difference. IDs can only be used once on a page, and they tend to represent the major design elements of a page. Classes can be used by lots of elements on the page. So IDs are unique, classes are not. Okay, over in LiveWeave, I've set up a little web page here. We've got a header, H1 header, classes and IDs. We've got a paragraph here, which I'm going to use as an introductory paragraph, and then a normal paragraph down here. I want to format this introductory paragraph differently to this one. Let's say I want to make it italic or bold. Now, obviously, if I was just to use the P selector and put font weight bold, then all of the text is bold, and that's not what I want. I only want the first paragraph to be bold. So this is where we can use a class or an ID. And the first decision we need to make is, do we use a class or do we use an ID? And the way to decide is the element we want to change once on the page, or could it appear multiple times on the page? Now in this particular case, this is an introductory paragraph, and there is only ever going to be one introductory paragraph on this particular website. So it's unique to the page, and therefore we can use an ID. Now, the most common way of applying an ID to a paragraph is to actually go up into the HTML, and we're going to create this directly within the P tag, the opening P tag, and I'm going to say ID equals, and then there's double quotes there. They're created for me by LiveWeave. I'm just going to type in something that will remind me what this is. And I can say, okay, we'll set this as ID intro. So this paragraph here, the first one, is now being styled with ID equals intro. But there's no CSS yet for this particular ID. So we need to declare the CSS for this. In the CSS, to declare an ID, we start with a hashtag. And then we type the name of the ID. So this is hashtag intro, and let's create the declaration block. What we can do now is add our formatting to the declaration block. Now this paragraph, which is ID intro, is bold because the CSS says for the ID intro, make it bold. Just to complicate things a little bit, the CSS can also be written by using the standard selector as well. So we could put a P before the hashtag intro to specify that the intro ID, when it's found in a paragraph tag, should be bold. However, with IDs this is very rarely used because the ID by its very nature is unique to something and it can only be used once on a page. So wherever that ID appears, then that's where this particular declaration will be applied. So let's have a look at classes, and I've set up a different HTML file here which has a list, an unordered list, and 2 paragraphs. Let's suppose we want to change the background colour of the fruits in this list one colour, and the vegetables in this list a different colour. So let's start off by defining the class, and it's simply a case of typing class equals, and then you've got the double quotes. Inside the double quotes we put the name of the class. So in this case I'm going to put fruit, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that code and I'm going to paste it into the list item for apple and the list item for banana. Now we're going to create a different class for the vegetables. Class equals, we'll call that veg, and I'm going to do the same, copy, paste. So now we've got fruit class used 3 times and veg class used twice, and that's the reason we need to use a class for this, because as you remember, IDs can only be used on unique items only once on a page. We're using class of veg twice and class of fruit 3 times. Now in the CSS, to define the class, we use a full stop or a period and then the class name, in which case we're going to start with fruit, and we put the decoration block, and let's say background color equals yellow for fruit. Now you can see the background colors of the yellow items in the list have turned yellow. Let's create another class, full stop or period, called veg. Open the decoration block, and we're going to put background color green. Okay, so now we've styled 2 items green, 3 items yellow using classes. In much the same way that with IDs we could actually put the selector in here, we can with classes as well. And the classes we are dealing with here are LI. So it's the same thing. We get the yellow background and the green background. By not including the selector, we are basically saying apply this to every class on the page the same. Now, what we could do here is we could say this paragraph here, this one's about fruit, and fruit will apply the class of fruit. And I've got my quote in the wrong place. And the fruit paragraph now turns yellow. Let's go down to the next one and say class equals veg, and that veg class is turning green. Now what we could do is we could say, okay, this is the fruit, the default color setting for fruit, and this is the default color setting for vegetables, but what if we wanted to have it slightly different when the fruit class is found in a paragraph? So we can type P full stop period fruit, open the declaration block and say, in this case let's have the background color say ivory, and now the background color to the paragraph has changed to ivory. It's still using the fruit class, but we're saying this case the fruit class when it's found in a paragraph tag. Let's change it to a slightly different color so it's easier to see. Okay, we change that to antique white, and we can do the same with the vegetable. So we put when the veg class is found in a paragraph tag, we can change the background color to, let's say this first one, Alice Blue. Okay, I'm going to have to type that in. And you see now that the veg class, when it's associated with a paragraph, has different formatting. So those are really quick examples of how to use classes and IDs. But there's one thing we haven't been able to do yet that I said we could during the introduction to this tutorial, and that is, what if we just want to highlight a particular phrase or sentence within a paragraph? Because at the moment all we're doing is the same as we'd seen before, where we change the whole paragraph. To do this we need to use something called a span element, and let me just show you quickly how to do it. We can use the span element in association with our classes. So a span element is simply the span to start where we want to apply the formatting, and then the closing span tag where we want to finish the formatting. And then what we can do is we can say, right, I want to create a class called highlight. This is in my CSS, and my highlight, I want to have background color equals yellow. Okay, so what I want to do in this case is highlight oranges have lots of vitamin C in yellow on the web page. So I've enclosed that sentence with the span tags, and then all I need to do in the opening span tag, I just say class equals highlight. And you can see now we've spanned that highlight just around one particular sentence. We could have that span just around a single word if we prefer, have it just around oranges. Now you can see just the oranges is highlighted. So that's a case of using a span element and a class to produce highlighting. And of course, because it's a class, we're allowed to have multiple usage of that class. And what have I forgotten here? Haven't got the closing. There we go. And you can see now we've got two instances where text is being highlighted using the span and the class.